I supported my mother for years, but when my son struggled to breathe, she turned her back. My name is Afonso. I'm 34 years old, and until recently, I considered myself an exemplary son. I work in financial planning and have always led an organized life, both personally and professionally. I'm married to Daniela, an incredible woman who has supported me through every difficult phase, and we have a 6-year-old son, Samuel, who is the center of our world. On the outside, everything seemed perfect, but inside there was a pent-up weariness, a weight I'd carried for years, and that for a long time I thought was normal. I grew up learning that my mother's love came with conditions, and that if I wanted any kind of approval, I had to earn it. And that earning always meant giving up on myself. From a very young age, I was responsible for everything. If my mother, Carmen, needed something, I was the one she turned to. If Juliana, my younger sister, messed up, which was often, I was the one to fix it, money to pay her debts, help finding a job, advice on raising her daughters. It always fell into my lap. And my mother? She never thanked me. In fact, she made it seem like it was my obligation. The cruelest thing is that, despite me doing everything for her, it was Juliana who received affection, praise, and attention. I was the useful son. She was the beloved daughter. For a long time, I swallowed this as if it were an inevitable fate. The turning point began to emerge when Samuel was born. It was the happiest moment of my life, but also the most challenging. I expected my mother, now a grandmother, to want to be around, to offer loving help, but that wasn't the case. She came to visit us in the hospital with a bored expression on her face and said literally that small children are a burden. This hurt me, but I tried to let it go. Daniela was disappointed, but didn't want to fuel conflict. We believed that over time she would warm up to her grandson. However, her coldness only grew, while she continued to practically babysit Juliana's daughters. For a while, I tried to fool myself. I told myself my mother was just her way, that she showed love differently, until one day, an emergency made me see everything clearly. Daniela and I needed to take Samuel to the emergency room because of a severe allergy attack. I called my mother, asking her to stay with him for a few hours. She said bluntly, "I'm no one's slave. You're on your own with your son." Her tone was dry, indifferent, and deep down what hurt the most was knowing that if Juliana had asked, she would certainly have said yes, because she always said yes to Juliana. That gave me a knot in my chest. From that moment on, something changed inside me. For the first time, I began to see how disposable I was to my mother. I wasn't loved, I was used. I was the son she used as a financial and emotional crutch, but whom she didn't see as worthy of affection. I found myself mentally replaying all the times I'd cancelled plans to solve her problems, all the times I'd helped financially, even when the budget was tight at home. I remembered the time I'd paid for her dental surgery up front, and she hadn't even thanked me. She just complained about the anesthesia. It destroyed me inside. I felt like a fool. I spent days ruminating on it. I'd talk to Daniela at night, and she, ever so cautious, would ask me how long I was going to accept being treated like that. "You're already a father." Afonso, isn't it time to stop trying to be the perfect son for a mother who never wanted to see that? That hit me hard. I started thinking about myself, about the example I wanted to be for Samuel. I wanted him to grow up seeing a strong, fair father, not a man who diminished himself to please someone who only knew how to suck. I knew breaking this cycle would be painful, but continuing in it was slowly destroying me. When I decided to cut off financial support, it was as if the ground had shaken. I called my mother and politely informed her that starting that month, I would no longer be able to maintain the monthly deposits I made to her. I expected any kind of reaction, surprise, sadness, perhaps an "Okay, Afonso, you've already done a lot." But what came was an attack, yelling, insults, accusations that I was ungrateful, that I was abandoning her. They said Juliana couldn't handle everything alone, that I was a man, I had more obligations. I felt my heart race. On the other end of the line, it was as if I were that 12-year-old boy again, trying to understand why my mother never stood up for me. She tried to manipulate my feelings. She said I was selfish, that she had raised me with sacrifice, and now I was punishing her. There was a moment when I almost gave in. I almost backed out, but I remembered my son's face in the hospital, his eyes red, and my mother refusing help without a second thought. I remembered Daniela holding my hand and saying, "That's it." And then, for the first time, I said something I'd never had the courage to say, "I'm not your bank, Mom, and I won't keep paying for a love that never existed." She hung up on me, and despite the pain, I felt light. In the following days, the silence was deafening. No calls, no messages, nothing. My mother simply erased me from her life, as if I were the ungrateful one. Juliana, on the other hand, came to me furious, saying my actions were cowardly, that I had let Mom down. She used those exact words. When I tried to explain everything I was holding inside, she scoffed. She said I was being dramatic, that a real man isn't shaken by such things. It hurt me deeply, but it also showed me that I would never be understood within that family dynamic. I was the only one who saw the problem because I was the only one who didn't benefit from it. The feeling of guilt came like an avalanche. I found myself wondering if I'd been too harsh, if I could have waited a little longer, if perhaps it was just a passing crisis. But the truth is that guilt wasn't mine. It was a guilt I'd been taught to feel whenever I thought about myself, a weight that came disguised as responsibility, but was actually manipulation. Daniela helped me a lot during that time. She reminded me every day that cutting off financial support wasn't an act of selfishness, it was an act of emotional survival, and I needed to survive, for my own sake and for the sake of my family. Over time, I began to notice little things that had previously gone unnoticed. The money I sent each month was never enough, even though it was more than the minimum wage. There was always something unexpected, something urgent, something Juliana owed. It was a never-ending cycle, and every time I helped, I received contempt and indifference in return. Now, freed from this burden, I was able to reorganize my life. For the first time, I set aside money for Samuel's future. For the first time, I bought something for myself, without guilt, a new bicycle I'd wanted for years. It was simple, yet symbolic. I was learning to live without carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. The decision to cut off support forced me to look at myself as an individual, not just as a son, husband, or father. I started therapy. At first it was uncomfortable. I felt guilty just telling the story. But over time, I realized I wasn't crazy. I grew up within an abusive emotional system and was only now finding the courage to break free from it. My therapist told me something I've never forgotten. "You didn't cut your mother out of your life, Afonso. You cut off the control she exerted over yours." That was liberating. That's exactly what I felt. Freedom. Over time, the pain gave way to peace. There were still moments of sadness, of course, seeing my family drift apart, feeling like I'd lost my mother even while I was still alive. It was a strange grief. But at the same time, I was present at home like never before. Daniela told me she was rediscovering the husband she knew, and Samuel started calling me to play every day after school. I no longer came home emotionally exhausted. I no longer tensed every time my cell phone rang. It was as if a shackle had been lifted from me and now I could breathe. Some relatives tried to make me back down. They said that family is everything, that mother is sacred. But for me, none of these phrases made sense when love was conditioned on blind obedience. I began to respond calmly, saying that yes, I believed in the value of family, but the one I'd built with Daniela and Samuel, that was my priority. Little by little, the pressures ceased. And those who kept insisting, well, they showed they were only around when it was convenient. Another hard but necessary lesson. The breakup forced me to grow emotionally in ways I never imagined. I began to look at my own story with more empathy. I understood that being the responsible son shouldn't mean being the sacrificed son. And that true love doesn't demand, manipulate, or ignore. True love welcomes, respects, and walks alongside. I didn't hate my mother, but I also couldn't hurt myself anymore trying to earn her love. Deciding to stop pleasing was simultaneously frightening and liberating, but above all, it was necessary. A year after that decision, I see myself as a different man. I still carry scars, it's true. There are days when I find myself remembering moments from my childhood, words from my mother that shaped my self-esteem for so long. But now I can separate what was love from what was disguised control. Today, I can look in the mirror and be proud of what I see. A present father, a supportive husband, and above all, a man who has learned to respect himself. Before, I was driven by the need for approval. Today, I am driven by the desire for peace. What surprises me most is realizing how my relationship with Samuel has changed. Without that weight on my shoulders, I've become more whole with him. We play more, talk more, laugh more. He no longer sees me as tense, as distant. Daniela even commented that he's sleeping better, that the energy in the house has changed. I never imagined that breaking up with my mother would bring so much relief. I always thought cutting ties would be synonymous with pain. But for me, it meant rebirth. I didn't stop loving, but I stopped denying myself. I still receive occasional messages from Juliana. Most of the time, they're indirect or attempts to provoke me, saying that mommy is feeling bad because of you, that the girls miss you, even though I know my presence was never valued by them. But now I no longer react with anger or guilt. I take a deep breath, ignore them, or respond kindly, because I understood that my role in that cycle was that of silent provider, and that by withdrawing, I dismantled a structure built on my own denial. Many people think that overcoming obstacles is a heroic act, a grand moment. But in my life, overcoming obstacles was a silent choice made on an ordinary day with a heavy heart and a firm voice on the phone. There was no audience, no applause, just me and my truth. What made it all so great was the constancy. Choosing myself every day, not giving in to guilt every day, remembering every day that my worth doesn't depend on what others want to take from me. This was the most significant victory of my life, the victory over guilt. Today, when I look back, I feel no resentment. I mourn something I never had, a healthy maternal relationship, but I also feel gratitude for having the courage to break away, to choose a new path. Gratitude for Daniela, who supported me even when she was tired. And gratitude for Samuel, who taught me what true love is, the kind that doesn't demand constant sacrifice, but is built on presence, care, and truth. It was because of him that it all began, and it is because of him that it all continues. Sometimes I'm asked if I ever plan to reconnect with my mother. And the answer is honest. I don't know. I haven't closed all the doors, but I also don't live waiting for her to change. If there ever is a reconciliation, it will have to be based on respect, not obligation. And until then, I'm following my path, because for the first time, this path is mine. And walking it has given me a peace I never knew existed, the peace of living fully. Sharing this story here is a way to free even more of myself. Maybe someone is reading this right now carrying a similar burden. And if that's you, I want to say you're not alone. It's not wrong to choose yourself. It's not selfish to protect your emotional health. Sometimes breaking up is the only way to find yourself again. And it's okay if it hurts at first. Some pain is the first sign that we're healing from something that's hurt us for years. My journey continues. Every day, I choose to be light. I choose to love without sacrificing myself. I choose to be the father I wish I had, and most importantly, I choose to move forward with a firmer heart, a higher head, and a soul finally at peace. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. May my story inspire you to write yours with more truth, more courage, and above all, more self-love.